Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, a place where you can come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 58, The Courage to Live in Your Truth. So this week, I have something special. I have a great conversation with a friend and fellow coach, Margaret Williams of Intuitive Professional Coaching. She's going to join me today. And since we were talking about self-confidence all month, I'm asking Margaret, if I were her client, how would she help me get back to who I really am? So some of the audio on this conversation is a little tricky, but I thought it was such a great connection, and she has some great wisdom to share that I didn't want to do it over. So without further ado, here's Margaret Williams. So I am so excited to have Margaret Williams with us today. She is a fellow life coach and someone I've come to know this past year and just continue to learn so much from. So Margaret helps clients get out of their own way, but mainly find out who they really are, what their strengths are, what their values are, and getting into alignment with all of that and creating a compass that points them to where they need to be in their life. Not only does she help them with individual life coaching, but with career coaching as well. So Margaret, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Mary, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, thanks for accepting it, because I want other people to hear all of your wonderful wisdom today. So I'd like to start out with our listeners getting to know you a little bit. What was it that made you decide to become a coach? Like, what was in your heart that drew you to this work?
Well, I had a lot of excess baggage that I have been carrying around with me for some time. And this excess baggage is like limiting beliefs and like self-doubt and fear of failure, fear of rejection, and these type of things which stem from my childhood. So I decided to get a life coach myself and to work with them to try to overcome these limiting beliefs so I could become the person that I was meant to be, that I was destined to be. And in doing this work on myself and seeing the transformation happening before my eyes, I decided this was something that I wanted to do as well to help other people.
Wow, so it was your own journey of transforming yourself, and so you saw what was possible, and that's made you want to step up and help others. That's really wonderful. And you have some previous work experience that helps you guide people, especially around your career coaching with them. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I work for the Army Corps of Engineers, and I worked for them for quite some time. And the reason I did that is because their values and my values were in alignment together. And in that collaborative space, I was able to thrive and to work collectively with others. We were able to meet mission objectives. In doing so, you build relationships with people. You're able to overcome challenges and obstacles, and you're able to improve your communication skills, not just verbally and also in writing. And it was just a magnificent experience, and to be able to transform myself professionally and having the opportunity to coach and mentor other people that I work with. It was just exciting times. And so I wanted to be able to translate this into my personal life with respect, since I have a career built. Okay, I'm looking at retirement, 3 years, 5 years down the road. So how can I utilize my knowledge and my skills to help other people to be able to do the same?
So transforming yourself professionally, that gave you so much insight and personal experience around, what that was like for you, and helping others do the same, is what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that in itself was in alignment with who I am, being of service to others. It's such a gratifying experience. And so most definitely looking at my life purpose, being of service to others, I would be able to definitely do that on a personal level.
That's amazing, and that must be so gratifying for you. So you and I talked before about what we're going to talk about today. The great stuff we always talk about, right?
Right.
About self-confidence and identity, right? So I know you've already kind of touched on some of this, but tell me why self-confidence and identity is what you love helping other people find. What do you bring to the table?
Well, to give you a personal example, when growing up, our character and personality, a lot of these things are being formalized by our parents, their vision and their beliefs, and that we try to emulate our parents. And in doing that, we try to conform to what our parents and society feel that we should be, okay? And as we're growing up, we're emulating our parents and other people in our lives that we have impressions about, maybe certain leaders or whatever. And in doing that, we don't necessarily identify with who we actually are, because we're still learning who we are, what we like, and so on and so forth. And we're continuing to change. You're going through, adolescence, childhood, adolescence, teenager, and then, being also influenced by our peers, and you having certain peer pressures. And so as we're continuing to try to conform to society's norms and our parents' a vision of who they want us to be, and we don't really realize who we are and the things that we want to do with our lives, we have a tendency to suppress that. And so that affects our confidence level. And so we are very unsure of ourselves. And struggling with this identity and confidence myself, I didn't get a chance to formalize this in a more positive way until after I got out on my own and, I got this job, and still, I was still having struggles with that until I went to life coaching myself, and to be able to accept who I am on my own terms. And that is where you realize the importance of becoming your authentic self.
Amen. Yes. And I agree with you. And I talk a lot about environments on the podcast because I'm a huge believer in the impact of our environments, especially like you talked about childhood. You kind of figure out who you are because people are essentially telling you who you are. And more importantly, like you alluded to, if you grew up in a family where those folks had a hard time allowing you to have your thoughts, feelings, and your beliefs, your dreams, how you saw your own talents, your own purpose, your authentic self, like you said. There's no choice but to suppress it in order to survive in the family. And how often, like in many families, end up stepping into a role like the comic or the caretaker or the peacekeeper, or at the very least, a parentified child. And so in order to do that, we have to subvert who we really are. And then, layered on top of that, if you're a parentified child and you have to grow up too fast, you don't even get to go through all the wonderful developmental stages that ultimately help you figure out who you are. A lot of people skip over that and end up having, a midlife crisis down the road, because it's going to have to happen sometime, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're always trying to put a square box into a round hole. We don't want to stand out. We want to be accepted. It's about belonging. And so in order to fit in, you are conforming to all of these other people's vision of who we should be. And that is really a problem.
It is. My work as a counselor can totally back that up. Because you see all kinds of anxiety and depression and a lot of dysthymic disorders, like a low-grade depression, but where people function, they get out of bed every day and they go to work and they take care of the kids, but they're not doing well. Panic attacks, all kinds of somatic issues, physical issues, because I think they're going against themselves, who they really are. And I think we can only do that for so long without paying a dear price for doing so.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And we also experience that once we get into relationships as well. Mm-hmm. What the most important thing is learning to love ourselves. We get into these relationships and we get into the idea of being in there and loving someone else and fitting into what their impressions of us are and how to satisfy other people's needs. But we have a tendency to forget about our own. And as we get married, we end up putting nothing wrong with it, but you put in your family, you put your family first, your kids, your husband, your job, and most of the time ourselves come dead last. And so by the time you think about yourself, you're so mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausted. Then you okay, then you go on throughout your day. Then you start over again. It's the same thing over and over until at some point you're lost. You don't know who you are, what you want. And it's a very tragic situation.
Oh, it is. I just sat with someone yesterday and it's just so sad. It's abandoning ourselves. And eventually, just like the drama triangle, we're the one hanging on the cross. We can't help but then become the persecutor and be resentful, hyper-focused on everyone else that's making us miserable, right? But instead of setting boundaries and taking care of ourselves, we rescue. We're like, it's all right, I'll do it. This is my role. I'll be fine. And round we go until something bad happens. You're right, because then we get angry at them for abandoning us and not giving us back what we give to them because we've been abandoning ourselves. And that other focus, I tell clients all the time, you had to learn that in childhood. You were taught that. It was modeled for you often, especially for women. I think moms can tend to model that quite a bit. And we just need to learn there's a wonderful balance of making room for others and doing what feels right in terms of nurturing and caring and taking care of ourselves and putting our oxygen mask on first, so to speak.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then once you find that once the kids get grown or once they get to a certain age, then they start gravitating towards their friends and then they have their own lives. Then they move out and then you notice that you're having these withdrawal symptoms because you've made everyone else your world and then you forgot about yourself, about your needs, about your wants. and then you're struggling to realize who you are and what you want in your life at that point in time.
Right, exactly. And that's how years ago I actually got into life empowerment work. And I was working with adolescents at the time. And then the moms would come in, and the moms were miserable and upset because their kid was individuating, becoming a separate person because they were supposed to at that age. They would start doing their own thing, and mom's whole identity was tied up in, like you mentioned a few moments ago, into being the mother and taking care of the kids. And she lost herself. So it's about finding who she is again. We can lose ourselves easily in taking care of others and then ignore taking care of ourselves. So my question now is, okay, Margaret, so I'm a client and I've come to you and I said, okay, Margaret, I've really lost who I am. Where would you help me start getting back to me? Finding my confidence, finding my true north. Like, where would you start with me?
Well, the first place I would start is to look at your values, okay? Looking at your values, looking at your strengths, and looking at also, as Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. Where do you envision yourself being 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road? What does that look like for you? And do we carve out a roadmap on how you can get there with the available resources that you have? Like I was talking about, your strengths and your values. Looking at, the way that you communicate with people and all of these different things, and to build on these small habits so you can have these small wins and we can build upon that. And as you build your self-confidence with these tiny habits, you are slowly able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And you say, hey, I think I can. Just like that little engine that could, I think I can. And before you know it, you're at the top of that hill. And along that journey, we're walking together. I'm feeling what you feel, seeing what you see, hearing what you hear. And together we'll get there. Now, there's going to be trials and tribulations along the way. But from those trials and tribulations, what lessons do we learn? The takeaways that we learn from those lessons, and that we can use that as fuel to continue learning and growing.
Wow. Yeah. I so believe in that. I think empowerment comes from doing. Like you said,
Absolutely.
The small triumphs that we have, and then what we bump into along the way is there for a reason, to show us something that we need to learn. I think oftentimes immaturities that we have in ourselves, old crappy coping skills that are now going to get in the way because they don't work anymore. Because I want to become who I want to become. If you're helping me look down the road, and I personally believe if people got honest and sat there long enough with themselves, they already know what that is. They have a good sense. They would not have come to a coach if they weren't frustrated and unhappy, even if that on the surface they think, oh, I don't know where I want to go. I just don't want to be here. I think that inside we know where we want to be. And I also want to say the new brain science that backs this up is your subconscious witnesses you doing those small habits and doing them well. It changes you. I think it changes us, and it gives us real proof, living proof that, hey, I can do this. Look what I can do. And I think that's the evidence, along with your coaching and you being there to mentor and guide and walk alongside the client, is a wonderful thing, because here comes the old counselor in me, right? It's like, this is the parenting that didn't happen, right? This is the mentoring that wasn't there. And I think just like a plant, you give it good soil and water and sunlight, it's going to grow because the environment is there. And then the real pure, authentic self, I think, just organically will start coming out. I really do believe that. And one of my favorite things in the world is to watch that happen in someone.
It is a wonderful thing. And the good thing about coaching is that as you're coaching the client and they transform, we are also transforming. It's like we're looking in a mirror and we're seeing ourselves. And as they transform, we're transforming as well. And we're growing collectively together.
I love that. But it's also personally been my approach from day one, even as a counselor. It's like, I use the word we a lot because we're not very different from one another, as opposed to the old idea of the counselor was the expert and the professional. I think that's true, but I also think normalizing and showing that we're all always growing together. And I think even though it's important to be a little further along the path so you can walk with someone and take their hand and show them, what's next. I think you're right. I think it's our own growth as well is huge when it comes to helping someone else, especially when it comes to having empathy and understanding about where a client is.
Yes, Mary, that's correct, because it's important to meet the client where they are. And by doing that, you're experiencing it with beginner's mind and having this curiosity. And as things break down into the conversation and you're able to see things very clearly about the pains and the struggles that they're going through, and you can see some of yourself in that individual. And as we know, the client is the subject matter expert. They do have all the answers. We just bring about the awareness through answering very powerful questions. And when they have these aha moments, it's just like the light just goes off. And that's just such a terrific feeling to have them experience that.
It really is. It's amazing. And it's amazing to see the real person become unearthed, so to speak. And you can feel the shift. I can feel it intuitively. When I'm on the phone with them or they're in front of me, I feel something amazing is happening. And it's really cool. So I'm your client. You're going to help me look at my values and what matters to me and where I want to be in 5 years, and to create small victories to create confidence for me. Is there anything else you would want me to look at in my life?
Well, we also want to look at things that supports that vision, and things that might get in the way. Because as we know, change is constant, and that there are going to be certain people in our lives that may not necessarily want us to succeed. I mean, that's just the reality. So being able to recognize these things, because as we shift our thinking, as we shift our behaviors, that's going to also shift other people's perceptions about us. And so we need to be mindful that some of the people that are in our lives today may not necessarily be in there as we make these changes, and that's okay. And sometimes we need to remove some of these people, some of these things. They are blockers that are preventing us from moving forward. And as we remove these barriers, then we are able to continue to move forward.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is something I bump into a lot with clients. And I joke with them, it's like, if I had told you this in the beginning, you might not have done this work. That guess what? You're probably going to outgrow people. And that freaks people out preemptively when they think about it. But they can't help it. That being around that person becomes nails on a chalkboard, and it feels like they don't even gel with them anymore. And I also say we are so vulnerable when we're doing this work that it is imperative that we have people who are healthy enough to support what is for our highest good, not what they want. But the kicker is usually if we struggle with self-confidence, we're hanging out with people who also struggle with self-confidence usually, and we might be hard-pressed to find people in our close-in circle that, will support. So it can create some conflict, absolutely, and some very, very difficult decisions. And that's why I'm so glad you brought it up. Environments are huge, and we need that support and tons of affirmation. That's why support groups work well. And we need a coach, and we need 3 or 4 people in our life who have our back. That's what's so important. And also, okay, let's say it's your family, right? You're not going to get rid of them, but maybe you don't bring the vulnerable stuff like this to them right now. Do you agree with that, or do you have other thoughts?
Absolutely. I totally agree with that, because you can sense that when you tell people, oh, I got a new job, I'm making more money, and I'm doing, I got a new car. And then you can tell by people's responses on whether they support that or not, or whether they're, for it or against it. And it gets you to thinking seriously about these healthy boundaries you're talking about. And one of the things, there's a fear of failure, but there's also a fear of success. And the reason people fear success is because it does bring about change. It changes your environment. You go into a new environment, you're meeting new people, you're doing different things, and people get stuck in a rut and in this, where they are, because it's safe. And people are scared to step outside of their comfort zone and try new things. But you got to be willing to take a jump off of that cliff and to have trust in your God-given ability, your skills, your talents, that you can be successful. And I'm okay. And once people realize that, your life will start to change in so many positive ways.
Absolutely. And the hard part is when they're not seeing enough change yet to quell their anxiety for jumping off that cliff. How do you help clients kind of work through that I want to do this, I don't want to do this? The ambivalence comes up when they're getting ready to pull the trigger on something.
Well, if you don't make that change, how can your life change? What's the worst can happen to you by moving forward and making this change? What things can you accomplish by making this change? Do you want to stay sitting on the sidelines, or do you want to, to hit home runs? Do you want to get that raise, that promotion? Do you want to get that car? Do you want to be able to help your kids through college? You have to remember the goal that you're trying to achieve and how you're going to get there. Envision you already have attained that goal.
I love that, because you're giving me a choice. And I have to own the choice. If that's what I want, then these are the things that I need to do in order to be where I want to be and have what I want to have.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because otherwise you wouldn't have come to me in the first place.
I love how you just lovingly call people out in the moment. I think that's fabulous. I know you do that with me, and I so appreciate it, because what it does is it, again, immediately forces me to look within and say, okay, what do I want? What do I really want here? And what am I willing to do in order to get it?
Absolutely. Because we can come complacent, we get stuck, and it's like we're paralyzed. Mm-hmm. And if we can stay in that same situation 3 years, 5 years down the road, and then you look back, what have I accomplished with my life? And do you want that, or do you want to be in a situation where not only that you can help yourself, but you can help other people around you to change their lives as well? Exponentially, you can do that. And so the decision is yours to make.
Say I assume I've made that decision, but I can't help but sabotage when I start to do something. Like, I don't want to sabotage myself, but I end up doing that, like even in real subtle ways, like quote unquote allowing other things to get in the way of what I said I wanted to do for myself today, kind of thing.
Well, what I find is a lot of this self-doubt and being critical of ourselves, a lot of things stem from our childhood. And some of the things I was talking about, these limiting beliefs that we carry around with us. Mm-hmm. And what it is designed actually to protect us. Just like a mother, for example. Don't you go outside because something's going to happen to you. That's a sign of protection. But if you don't go outside, how are you going to go to work? How are you going to be able to pay your bills? How are you going to be able to, to take care of yourself and do the things that you need to do? So you have to negotiate with that side of yourself and realize what's most important for you. You have to set priorities and set goals. And you have to use all of these resources that you have available to you. You have these inner resources which is being courageous, being determined. You're resilient. You have to be strong. All of these strengths and things that you have. And then your exterior resources that you have available to you as well. Maybe a supporting and loving family. You have maybe your boss is a really good mentor for you. Then you have certain leaders and so on and so forth. So we have to utilize all of the things that we have available to us to overcome all of these things. These limiting beliefs don't necessarily go away, but you're always looking at the big picture and what you're trying to achieve, and you keep pushing forward.
Beautifully said. So essentially what you're saying is, I have my limiting beliefs about myself, but then something else becomes more important than those beliefs in the moment. And sometimes I need to grab the courage and keep reminding myself. And I think it's important to have people around us to remind us at first too, until we can really internalize that. And, to change the paradigm in our head, we need people to say, no, you can do this. And like you said beautifully earlier, it's like, okay, if you don't do this, if you don't go outside, if you play it safe, you're not going to have what you want. And then that forces choice, and it forces ownership of the choice, which I love, because when I look at fear, it's like something out there is bigger than me dictating my life versus, oh, wait a minute, I have some choices and I can focus on that. And then the choice is the antidote to the fear, I think, out of fear and into choice. Again, though, if I struggle with confidence, I'm not going to trust my ability to make good decisions, damn it, right? That can trip me up. And that's why I personally think we need a couple people in our life who believe in us and say, it's okay. You can do this. And here's why I think you can do this. This is what I see in you. I try to do that with clients all the time. And I don't BS people. I'm like, this is what I see. I mean, this logically, I think you can pull this off. I also think nothing is put on our heart for no reason. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I am a very intuitive person. And so trust in my intuition and my feelings. Sometimes, if you might meet a person and you get a strange feeling, then I would listen to that inner voice and it's trying to tell you something. It's your guide. And when you get these feelings and you listening to it and you listening, to the things that is true, you have to respond to that and pay attention. Because I tell my clients this too. It's like a car. You're hearing these noise and everything. Don't ignore it. You have to pay attention to it. And you take your car to the shop. Because if you don't, eventually your car is going to break down and you're going to oh my goodness. But you got all these signs 2 or 3 weeks ago and you didn't pay attention. So we need to pay attention to the signs that the universe is telling us. Okay? Somebody else might have said something to you about it and you just ignored it. You know, you got a feeling about it and you ignored it. So this is the consequence of that situation. So I would definitely say that.
I love that. And it's like we always know when we don't listen to it, right? And intuition can be vague, though. And in front of us, we're like, I don't really see anything hugely wrong, but I have a funny feeling. But then in hindsight, we're like, oh, that's why. And so what's recommended is we just trust it. To me, you're talking about self-trust. If I'm trusting my intuition, two things. I'm learning to trust myself as opposed to allowing other people to tell me what reality is, right? I mean, that's a whole other episode, but we could talk about that. And the other thing is I'm not alone. I am being guided. And I think that can take some fear away for people. I know it has for me over the years, you know, saying, okay, well, I'll be guided. You know, there'll be signs along the way. Like a client said last night, she said, I had 5 signs from the universe in 1 week, and I decided to pay attention to them. I think it helps us feel more grounded. I think that that's what intuition is. It's a whisper, and you feel calm in a certain knowing. Like, I don't know how else to describe that. It's just a knowing.
I couldn't agree more. And then I was talking to someone else, a colleague, and I'm like, if 3 or 4 people tell you the same thing, you know, you have to take a look at that. If it's just one person, then he's like, I don't know. So definitely there are guides, people, and the universe tells us things, and we need to be paying attention to all of these signs and trusting ourselves as well, which helps us make the correct decisions that we need to make in our lives.
Right. Yes. And so I think one of the biggest quandaries that people come to us with is finding their sense of purpose and how that relates to who they are. And I think it completely relates to feeling confident, because when we find a sense of purpose, I think that is confidence building in and of itself.
I totally agree with that, because it's something that comes natural to you. It's like innate. For example, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a singer. And it was something that was a natural ability. You see some people that they can play the piano without being able to read music. People can, you know, paint, so on and so forth. Some people are very good orators, and it's a natural talent. And it's something that, again, is innate and something that you enjoy doing. And this is what I would say a calling. And to be able to do that, it's just like breathing. And so confidence is sometimes something that has to be built as well. Again, with building these small, tiny habits and building upon that. And this is how we can gain self-confidence. As you do things, you're building the confidence. So it's just not a matter of, it's like Nike said, just do it, you know. And as you continue to do things, you start to build the self-confidence and you start to become, you know, proficient.
Right, because that experiential evidence just doesn't lie. We can't make it up. We just can't. It's proof. It's there. Right. And it is often in stark contrast to what other people maybe tried to tell us. People who were threatened if we thrived or succeeded, because then we would have to leave them, and deep down they know that. I mean, that's why in abusive relationships, when the person's getting ready to leave, they're in the most danger. And they set that big boundary because the other person is terrified of being abandoned and being rejected and being not good enough. So I think, too, allowing the process to unfold. Like, I want to talk for a minute about control, one of my favorite subjects, as it pertains to self-confidence, because if we have control issues like perfectionism, trying to control the outcome or keeping everyone happy while I'm doing this journey for myself, it's going to be hard to feel grounded because I'm still looking out there. Like I'm looking out there for everyone to be happy with me changing and doing different things and taking a different path and speaking my mind, God forbid, because assertiveness definitely goes hand in hand with confidence, right? That I think an internal locus of control, how do you help clients, bring it back to that? And how do you help them focus on letting go of control and just allowing the process to unfold, especially, and here's the kicker, if they've had trauma in the past and it's hard to trust?
Absolutely. You have to trust, first of all, in yourself. And it's important to be yourself and speak your truth, regardless of what other people feel about it. And to go with the flow. If something doesn't feel right, then don't do it. And so when you speak your truth, you believe in yourself and your God-given abilities and experience, everything else falls into place. If you try to, as we know, if you're swimming and you try to go against the current, then, there's a problem. But when you go with the flow, the flow of life, things move very systematically and with ease. There might be bumps, waves and stuff along the way. But those things allow us to learn and to grow. And that's what life's all about.
I love that. I love that so much because you just told me what I can look out for. And if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. And that it's okay if I bump into a few things, that they're going to help make me stronger. So then I know a little bit about what's coming. And I think that if you have control issues, you have tons of anxiety. So I think it's extremely helpful. And I've had clients share this with me. They're like, Mary, I remembered what you said, like, look out for this and you might run into this and it's okay if you bump into that, because it was reassuring for them and they didn't feel so lost or overwhelmed, that they had some things to look out for. And I think that, that's what teaching and coaching can be, the teaching part of coaching, rather.
And another thing, Mary, what I learned is to live in the present moment, because the past is gone. The future is not here. So living in the present moment, you can enjoy what's in front of you. In the here and now, you can enjoy the sun and the birds and the trees. And you just live in that present moment and just go with the flow. Things have a tendency to go as they're supposed to go. Mm-hmm. And that minimizes your stress and eliminates any overwhelm. And things go normally as they should. Not to say that there's not going to be, like I said, dips and curves along the way, because there are going to be. That's just life.
Right. I like that. Thank you. I think that was very informative. And what's neat today is listening to you as if I were a client. I feel like if I worked with you, I'd have like this wonderful guidance system, right? And something that would lovingly challenge me, but also I would not feel alone and I would not feel like I had to have all the answers. And I think that's where, some of your testimonials, talk about your wisdom, very wise soul, I think you've been called. And I agree with that. In getting to know you myself, I take away a lot of wonderful things from our conversation. In saying that, is there anything that I didn't talk about today in terms of self-confidence or didn't bring up that maybe you think we should, so that listeners get the whole package?
No, well, some of the other things that I do myself is I like quotes. I will read positive quotes, say positive affirmations. I also do daily meditation. Another thing can help is also journaling. And these are some of the other things that can help with confidence as well.
Thank you. I love that. Yeah, the positive input of affirmations and quotes. And I love quotes too, because they encapsulate a whole concept, right? And I can carry that around and keep looking at it and saying it, reminding myself, and in terms of that's what I'm working on today. And then the journaling is getting our truth on paper, and it can be so validating and revealing too. So thank you for that. So if there was like one takeaway that you want our listeners to have from this conversation today, what would you say that would be?
Be true to who you are. Live life on your own terms.
I love that. And that's a journey in and of itself, sometimes just becoming truer to who we are. And courage came to mind when I heard you say that, to live life on my own terms. And there's often, like we talked about, a change in environments that may need to happen in order to support that. Margaret, thank you. This has been great, as always, as we love to talk about these topics, right? I think that, self-confidence is something that my clients bring to me often, and I personally think is at the core of everything, because I believe that once we really start focusing on loving ourselves, accepting ourselves, and gathering the courage to create a life, like you said, in alignment with who we really are, then life becomes amazing over time. And I think it keeps becoming more and more expansive. And I think we always want more and better for ourselves. I mean, I think Maslow was right. I think we are all reaching for self-actualization. And so I'm so excited that my clients have gotten to meet you today. And so if they would want to seek you out and work with you and see all your great material, where might they find you?
Well, my website is iprofessionalcoaching.com. iprofessionalcoaching.com. And Mary, it's truly been a pleasure today being here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Margaret. Love talking about this stuff. I learn something new every time I do. All right, you take care.
You too. Thank you very much.
So thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed listening to Margaret and I talk about self-confidence and the ways we all need to find the courage and use the courage to get back in touch with who we really are. So if you want to find out more about Margaret and hire her to work with you, you can go to the show notes. I have the links to her website and some more information about her. Also on the show notes, if you're not already a tribe member, there's a place to sign up to get the SOAR Tribe newsletter each Tuesday. And that's where you can receive all of the updated information about the show. You can listen to the show. You can go to past episodes and get the bonus downloads that I have for several of the episodes. And you can pass it along. So remember, pay it forward. Take really good care of you this week, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you could begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.